In this video, I'm going to show you how to configure the Guild Wars 2 Scrolling Combat Text add-on for use in World vs. World. If we take a quick look at what this looks like, you can see that these icons are rendered over the game. They show key skills that we are getting hit by that you, in a larger scale context, might not otherwise be able to see from the animation, giving us a clear advantage. So to install the add-on, we need to find the GitHub repository, click Releases, and grab the DLL from here. In its most simple configuration, we just need to put this file in our Guild Wars 2 installation directory, that is where our Guild Wars 2-64.exe is, and next to our arc DPS DLL. Now, once we've run the game for the first time with the add-on in this directory, it will generate for us this SCT folder. This is where the configuration for the add-on lives. We're mostly going to be concerned with sct.json. However, it's important to note that we also have this icons directory. These icons get downloaded by the add-on, but some of them are going to be missing by default. Off the top of my head, that includes Guardian Tome skills and things that aren't actually skills, like Relic and Sigil procs. I'll show you how to add those later. Next, we move on to the fonts directory. These are fonts I'm just using for aesthetic purposes. You can use whichever ones you like. However, included in the description of this video will be the blank.ttf file. Before you configure the rest of the add-on, you need to make sure you have downloaded this and put it in the fonts directory. Effectively, this is just a font that has all the glyphs removed, and the reason why we need that will become clear soon. So if we head over to the game, this is the more or less default configuration of the add-on. I'm using this example messages feature here, just with me getting hit by some skills, so I can omit those and show you how the add-on is working without having to actually be in combat. So the first thing we'll see here is that I've changed the default font size for both crit and non-crit to be the same size, because in this context I don't want to differentiate between the two. I've also made them quite a bit larger. I've set the size to 50. You might want to make it a bit smaller. It's just because we're just looking at the icons. If we head over now to the skill icons tab, you'll notice that we need to tick the enable skill icons box and also the preload all skill icons box. This will start to download those icons into this folder here. It takes a bit of time to complete. You need to leave the game running while this is happening. If we head over now to the filtered skills tab, you'll see that it's empty, but this is where we're going to add our filtered skills. What this means is that we're going to effectively add every ID that we don't want to see, because it's a block list, not an allow list, which is frustrating but achievable with a script. Once you've run the script, I highly recommend that you do not open this filtered skills tab again in game, because it will tank your FPS just because of how long the list is. I don't know exactly why. If we head over now to the scroll areas tab, we'll see the default configured scroll area. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to shift this left a bit. I prefer it to be in this kind of position. The default, I think, is text flow straight. This is what I prefer, but in the video we just saw, and as you might see on some streams, people are using this left text flow. This is what gives it this kind of curve. If we play that now, we should see it if we add some of these emitters. Hang on. Yeah, there we go. And exactly how much this curves by is controlled by this width here. So if we make this much larger, you'll see that they flow. Maybe you find that aesthetically pleasing. I personally don't, so I configure this to have a small width. And frankly, you may as well just use straight. So if we add now some receivers, we've got physical hit, we'll add in physical crit as well. You can see in here that we've got the default template. And as we play back these messages, you'll see that we've got the icon, the name of the attacker. That won't really render for you when you're in World vs. World. Anyway, and you also have the amount of damage. Now, we just want to see the icon, so we're going to get rid of this text in the template. But what you'll notice as we watch these fall down is that actually here it says 2 hits, and that this isn't referenced in the template at all. So even if we remove all of this only to show the icon, we are still unfortunately going to see that 2 hits. It's not part of the template, it's just part of the add-on. In other contexts, it's much more useful. So to get rid of it, what we're going to do is set our font to this blank.ttf. All this is a font that doesn't have any actual glyphs in it. It's still rendered by the game. It still takes up the same amount of space, but you can't actually see any glyphs. So now if we play it back, you'll see that there is no 2 hits. Great. So that's the majority of our configuration, except that you'll notice that one of these was way off to the side, and that is because we're using text align middle, and even though we can't see the text where the 2 hits is, because our font has no glyphs, it's still actually there. And so to get around this, we can set this to left. At this point, you might want to look at the amount of messages in a stack and the speed that they fall down and this kind of thing, just to see if we can make this a bit more aesthetically pleasing. But I think the default is largely fine for most people. So that's the majority of the plugin configured. We now have to run the script to add in the filtered skills. Before we exit the game to do that, I am going to show you this one last tab, the Profiles tab. Now, unfortunately, this is broken, and I'm going to describe the way that it's broken as best I can. You can create different profiles, but if you change profile while the game is running, it doesn't work properly. I'm just going to show that now. So if we changed this barrier profile, you can see here I've got a configuration for my outgoing barrier, but it doesn't actually render. And if I start this emitter here, it's just going to show it's actually using the previous profile, but it is using this part of the configuration, as in the font size. So you can use this to have different configurations. You just have to restart the game to apply them. So if I wanted to swap to a specific tab that I have for GVG that has an incoming combat log, I could do that. However, I would have to restart the game now after I've selected this profile. Otherwise, the same profile that I started the game with is going to keep rendering. There's actually some even confusing things here where if I add a new scroll area, even on a different profile, just the easiest way to show this in game is to quickly do shield created, because you don't have to be in combat for this. So this is going to show barrier, shield created is barrier. So you can see now that this is rendering. However, these other parts of the template are not. And if I start emitting these messages, actually our other template is still working. So this is just broken. Unfortunately, it means you can't use it. This character-specific profile that otherwise would have been quite a useful feature is just completely not working because of this, so don't even try and use it. I'm going to move this back now. I'm just going to delete that scroll area we made. Oh, would you look at that, the game has crashed. Fantastic. With that said, we'll leave that there and head over to the included script. I am using Windows PowerShell ISE for this, primarily because it's in every Windows installation. If you wanted to roll your own Python script, or frankly, you could probably achieve the same thing just using a text editor, then be my guest. So, what I've collected here for you is a bunch of the skills that I have encountered in game that I found useful with this plugin. I heavily recommend that you don't try and use all of these, but the fact that I've written these out here should save you a lot of time in finding them personally. Just an example of how you can find these IDs: if you head over to the wiki, search for a skill like Arc Divider, you should see the skill ID listed here. Now, there's a problem. The IDs that are here are not always the IDs that you actually need in game. So I will show you a little bit later how I approach finding them. So let's take a quick look at this script. I wrote this several years ago. I'm not really sure why I use some of these list types, but basically what we're doing is writing a long list of IDs from the highest skill in the GW2 skill API list. So if we look at that, it's all of these here. So it spans from like 1K right up to this. So we take the highest figure from here, and hypothetically we could either take the lowest number from here, or we could specifically use all of these IDs because they're not quite sequential. But the method that I decided on was just taking the highest ID from here, and then I arbitrarily arrived at 700 as my lowest. So we are going to filter every ID from 700 to this upper here. And the reason I did this is because there are a lot of non-skill IDs that sit between 700 and 1K. So a lot of the mid 700 skills are things like regen and burning, poison, this kind of conditions. So if you wanted a scroll area that showed healing over time, that would include regen if you didn't cap this a bit lower, and you probably don't want to see regen. So that's why it's done that way. So to go over how you use this script, in its core, you just need to change this directory here to match the directory where you have the SCT folder. So find your installation directory, click add-ons, click SCT, copy this path, paste it in here. Now, the next thing to note is this script works when you have multiple profiles configured. And this is a little bit confusing, but the default profile cannot be removed. This is the profile you start on in the add-on, so the one that most of you will likely be using. I have then added heal, barrier, GVG, and DPS. If you wanted to create your own profile and name it, you could type in a name here, and then you could put a different list for each one. We also have this default option here. Now, what this actually does is it catches any profile that isn't named. So if you are only using one list of skills for your profiles, it means you can really just name them whatever you want. You don't have to change anything here. It's going to get caught by this. So that makes it easy to use. With that said, I've amassed most of the skills that I think are useful in the game. Now, I don't actually use it this way when I'm playing, but just as an example to help you out, I've added some different lists here. So these are skills I think are useful in open field. These are skills I used to use in GVG. You can see this is a few years old because you've got like Soul Beast stuff here. And so you can see that the GVG profile is using that defined list. But what I would do at its core, you're just going to be using this allowed skills list. So you're probably not going to want to see all of these skills in game. So what I recommend doing, instead of just deleting them from this list, which you could do just like that, is just commenting them out, and then you can always add them back in later if you want to see them. However, for your own sanity, I do recommend looking at the smallest possible list of skills. So let's run this script. We can see now that the file is increased in size by quite a lot, and that we have all of these exclusions here. If you are going to roll your own script for this, or do this in another way, you're going to want to find a way of like compressing it or compacting it, otherwise it's going to be 3 times as large, which is not super convenient. So I'm going to jump back into game now. So as you can see, I've now selected this barrier profile, which has different scroll areas configured. Because we've restarted the game, this is going to work correctly. If I click here, we can see the barrier that we're generating. Now, something to note with this is that all of these options here are respective of the profile you're on. So you can see that the font size is smaller on this one. These 2 options are also specific to the profiles. This one might be relevant if you're creating a profile for looking at healing related stuff. So we can see with this unticked, if I apply barrier, that it's hitting 3 targets, and that's including me. But if I tick it and just cast barrier on myself, we can see that nothing is procced. So yeah, I'll leave this just on the screen so you can see it. So show self messages only as incoming, and obviously we're looking at outgoing here. If we take a look now at the skills that I've defined in these lists, you'll see that some of them have these little exclamation marks at the beginning, and those are skills that you may well want to remove because they work in ways that are kind of unfortunate. So there's Essence of Animated Sand, Bulwark Gyro. These both proc heal events when they're not supposed to. I don't really understand why, but depending on what windows you have configured, this might be detrimental if you want it to be accurate. So as you can see, these are things that are supposed to apply barrier. But if we look at if we start recording the example messages and play these, you can see that they also show heal events when they're not supposed to. It's just a bug. I don't know exactly what it's caused by. So there are some other skills in here that also are marked in the same way, like overheat, and some skills that just aren't here at all because of how they work. If we look to the healing list for a second, I've also marked Shortbow 3 on NG, and that's just because while you could allow list this skill so you can see the healing from it, because it also has a DPS, or like a damage, strike damage portion to the skill that has the same ID. If you are rendering these icons of incoming damage, especially in large scale, in metas where support NG is played, you are going to get hit by some of these short bow skills and other skills like it, maybe the druid ones, quite a lot. So for your own sanity, I recommend not including those. I'm going to touch now upon the icons. As I said, not all of them are included. If you look at this list for healing skills, I have some IDs here for Caracosa and Flock. And if we search the icons directory, you can see that I have the icon for this, but this wouldn't be included by default. I found it on the wiki. And grabbed the little image here. One thing to note is that this is a PNG file, and the icons in here need to be JPEG files, so you'll have to convert it online through whatever process you can come up with. That's more or less it for the configuration of this add-on. It's very useful. I definitely think it can be aesthetically pleasing as well, potentially for like stream content. I also think it's possible to create like a kind of more combat log type thing on the screen, and that this could potentially be helpful for footage review, especially with less experienced guilds, because it can just cut out some of the arguing around what happened for less experienced players, because you can see a log of it. Did you get hit by the skill? Yes or no? Did the enemy dodge the skill? Yes or no? It can also show signets, or the heal from signets and this kind of thing. So that should have covered everything. I did this off the cuff, so I likely did forget some things. If anything isn't clear, just shoot me a message and I can help you out.